So one of the things that we hear from some members of the comic book community is that speculators are bad for comics. That speculators will lead to the downfall of this hobby as we know it. There are people that believe that money in comics is a bad thing. And I'm going to go out on a little bit of a limb here, and I'm going to say that speculators are good. I'm going to say that speculators are important for this hobby. And over the course of this recording, I want to try to provide a couple of things for you all to think about. And maybe on the other side, and maybe even before we get on the other side, you will agree with me or disagree with me. Maybe I'll give you a couple of things for you to think about. Maybe some people's minds will be changed. Some people's minds will be hardened and they will be more entrenched in their position. But my hope overall is that I create a little bit of space for people to maybe think a little bit differently than maybe they did before. And or they give a little bit more thought to why they feel the way that they do. And wherever they land on the other side, I think is all the better because they've taken an opportunity to hear maybe some points of view that are a little bit different than their own. One of the things that I think about whenever I think and hear about this notion that speculators are bad for the hobby of comics, one of the things that I think about is that many of us are speculators. Many of us speculate on comics. And what I mean by that is that I have probably been a speculator since I was a child. The first book that I probably picked up was one that I immediately put in a bag and board because I spent my hard-earned money on that comic and I wanted to preserve it for the future with the hope that it might be worth a few more dollars than what I spent on that comic. I remember I used to work at rallies. Back in the day, I used to work at rallies, and many of you will know it as Checkers, but I used to work at rallies in Oak Park, Michigan. And I would work there for a couple of bucks. I think I was making like $4.25 or something like that back in the day. And I would get my check and I would go to the bank and I would deposit my check. And then I would go to either the record store. Best Buy had just opened, I want to say around this time, or I would go to the comic book store and I would literally spend just about all my money in one of those two places. And I would buy up comics and I would then come home and I would lay in my bedroom in the basement and I would read my comics, and then I would promptly get up and I would bag and board them and I would stick them in one of 3 long boxes that I had in my closet. And it was my way of protecting my collection, protecting my investment, because I worked really hard for those comics and those CDs, flipping burgers. And I still have many of the comics that I bought back in the day. I still have many of those books in my collection to this day. And many of those CDs I still have in my collection because I am a speculator. Or am I a collector? Or am I a reader? It's kind of hard to tell sometimes because in many ways, those things are all the same person. And I've spoken about this before in the sense that many of us not only read comics and buy them because we read them, we buy them because we are collectors. We buy them because we are speculating, because we are going to take that comic, we are going to wait for it to go up in value, we are going to turn around and sell it, and then we're going to buy something else, or we're going to celebrate the fact that that comic actually went up in value. I paid $3 for it, or 75 cents back in the day, or $1.25, and now it is worth X. And in some cases, it doesn't even matter what it's worth because we're probably not going to sell the comic anyway. But the idea that someone that invests in comics for the purpose of seeing them increase in value, that premise that they are bad, is something that I struggle with, especially because we're not talking about a separate group of people. We are talking about the people that go to the new comic book day and buy comics at the local comic shop and then read them in their car. we are not talking about some outside influence, right? Where people are coming in off the streets, rushing into the comic shop to buy up the latest copy of Thor so that they can turn around and make $1 million on it. That is not what we're talking about. Now, are there people that are in this hobby that are not in it for the good reasons? For good reasons? Absolutely. Are there bad people in this world? Yes, there are, right? The idea that you can just slap a label on a group of people and say they are bad as a group, that is not necessarily the right way to kind of approach this thing, right? There are good and bad. And so to just simplify it and say all speculators are bad, anybody that's in it for the money is bad, that is too simple of a response. Because again, there are good and bad people all over, within every segment, there are good and bad. So here's the thing. When somebody goes out and buys a house, why do they do it? They go out and they buy a house because they need a place to live. But they also believe that by investing their money in that house will be worth more money after a certain period of time. And yes, they will live there. It will shelter them. They will make improvements to it. They will enhance it. But they are doing it because they need shelter, but also because they believe that there is money to be made on that house. Are they bad people? No, they're just homeowners. They are homeowners. And one of the biggest investments that most people actually have is their home. People that buy stocks, why do they buy stocks? They buy them in companies in many cases because they use the products and services that are offered by that company and they want to support it. But the other part of it is that they want to celebrate in that company's success by making money off of the stock that they have purchased. And they hope that after a period of time, that stock will be worth more money than what they put in. Are they bad for that? Absolutely not. They're actually pretty smart people. They're pretty smart. If they're investing in stocks and they have a house and all this good stuff, these are the kinds of things that you want to do. When somebody goes and gets an education, are they getting that education simply because they enjoy learning? No. They're also doing it because they want a job, and they want a job so that they can have money so that they can buy things. But are they bad because they are interested in money? Are they bad because they decided to get an education? Absolutely not. They're called students and responsible people, right? People have kids. Do they have kids just because they want somebody to tear up their house? And they just want somebody to feed and take care of? No, they have kids because they want to continue their name. They want to continue contributing through society. They want to test their mettle by seeing if they can raise some creature from infancy into adulthood and to see whether they can make them into contributing members of society. And they want someone, in some cases, to take care of them when they're old. Does that make them bad because they decide to have children and it's not just for the purpose of continuing society? No, it makes them parents. This idea that because I buy a comic, because I want that comic to be worth some money, the idea that I'm bad and that that's dirty is just wrong. It is too simple of a response to say that speculators are bad. It is too simple of a response to say that anybody that wants to make money off of a comic is bad. That's just the wrong way to do it. One of the other things that I think about is that people will say not only are speculators bad, but if you don't read your comics, you are not a true collector. Since when? Since when? When is it bad to spend one's hard-earned money on something for the purpose of just appreciating the art that it is? Who says that you have to read your comic in order to enjoy it? Likewise, these people that say that you cannot be a true collector if you grade your comics? Why can I not be a collector? Why can't I be truly into this hobby simply because I want to encapsulate my comics and protect them long term and to preserve them? Well, you can't read it. Okay, I can't read that copy, but I can certainly read the comic. I can certainly appreciate the artwork. I can certainly appreciate the story behind how I actually acquired that comic. And let's be completely honest, if you have a comic that is an expensive comic, are you really taking it out of the plastic and thumbing through it just because you want to peruse it? Are you really doing that? Because I really find that hard to believe that anyone is just taking out a Hulk, 181 or 180 now for that matter, and just flipping through the pages just because they want to read it. I can honestly close my eyes and I can picture covers of comics in my collection, and I can remember the stories that are contained within those comics simply by looking at the cover art, because I have read those comics. I have committed those comics to memory in some cases. I don't need to take it out of the plastic and thumb through it to remember it, because I can recall these stories. The other thing is, I can look at a facsimile cover or comic. I can look at a digital comic. There are lots of ways to enjoy comics that don't necessarily involve taking them out of the plastic, that don't necessarily involve flipping through them, that doesn't necessarily involve reading them. The idea that a true collector is one that does not care about condition or quality or money, and that just reads their comics just for the pure sake of enjoyment. The idea that that is the definition of a comic book collector and someone who appreciates comics is too narrow a definition. In my mind, we need all types of people in this hobby. We need those that read comics. We need those that just appreciate the artwork. We need those that speculate. We need those that sell the comics. We need all types of people, because that is how a hobby actually survives. It does not survive with a single type of person. It survives with people that are open-minded, that are receptive and welcoming to other people, that appreciate other people's points of view, that appreciate how other people actually appreciate the hobby. Because what would it look like if we said that you are a true collector only if you read Archie comics? Only true collectors read Archie comics. Only true collectors read Golden Age. Only true collectors read horror. No. That just doesn't even sound right. So the idea of saying you're not a true collector if you don't read the comic, you're not a true collector if you don't thumb through your expensive comics just because. We need all types of people. We need to be inclusive of other people's points of view, even if you don't agree with it. I don't like Archie comics. It's just not something that appeals to me. But that's okay. That is okay, because here's the beauty of it. I also didn't like DC comics at one point in time. And then what happened? I started reading DC and I was like, ooh, DC is not bad. Maybe in another 10 years, I will learn to actually embrace Archie comics. So why not just start off from a position of inclusivity? Why not just start off from a standpoint of that's not my thing, but if you enjoy it, that's actually okay. You enjoy it, I'm going to enjoy what I enjoy, and we can actually get along because we both enjoy this hobby of collecting. One of the things that will turn new people off to a hobby is when people look down upon other people. And when people are being told there is only one way to do something, when there isn't. Looking down upon people, making them feel bad, making them feel stupid, making them feel not welcome. Those are surefire ways to see a hobby fold. Openness, receptivity, welcoming people. Those are the answers to ensuring that this hobby continues to survive. Because here's the thing. Somebody that doesn't read comics today, that buys them for the cover art, is still buying comics. They are still contributing to the hobby. They are still participating in, new comic book day and in chats that happen around comics. They're still buying supplies. They're still buying all of the accoutrements that are needed by the hobby. Why are they bad? And here's the thing. In a year, 2 years, maybe they'll actually start to read comics, but they won't. They won't even be here if people look down upon them, if people make them feel unwelcome, if people make them feel less than simply because they don't read the comics, simply because they don't fall into this narrow box that someone has decided is the true definition of a comic book collector. Receptivity, openness, inclusivity, diversity of thought, diversity of interest. Those are the things that will allow this hobby to continue to thrive and survive into the future. So as you guys can probably tell, I'm a little fired up. I want to thank you guys for taking the time to listen to this recording. I hope that you enjoyed it. And if you did, I want to encourage you to hit the thumbs up button. If you did not enjoy this commentary, don't just hit the thumbs down. Tell me why you didn't enjoy it. Tell me, help me to understand your point of view as to why the definition of a comic book collector has to be a narrow thing. Help me to understand. Because here's the thing. I'm not afraid to be wrong. I'm not afraid to make myself vulnerable. I'm not afraid to hear another person's point of view if they are able to articulate to me what their point of view actually is versus saying something is bad. Because help me to understand your point of view. Help me to understand where you're coming from. And if you do agree, then hey, that's awesome too. If you need to reach out to me, feel free to do so on Instagram at Regie Collects, or you can send me an email to Regie@regiecollects.com. Take care.